Welcome back to Punk Politics. I'm Aid Thompson. How far is Britain from civil unrest? In 2011, the London Riots, normally a yearly affair confined to the kettles of Notting Hill Carnival, proved their scalability by expanding to the tube stops and suburbs of wider London. And of course, then, a lot of England. Everyone got in on the fun. I was like, is this civil unrest kicking off? Or just a natural end game for where Black Friday was always going to end up? Of course, the London Riots, as they came to be known, started off as just protests in Tottenham, and that was following the unlawful shooting of a local, Mark Duggan. But before you could say criminalised protests, the protests turned criminal. Riots graduated to the looting of homes and businesses.
Once again, they came to smash what they could.
And then the looting became hijacked and burnt out buses. Unfortunately, Boris was nowhere near this one. Anything was fair game as hoodies took a break from hugging David Cameron. At least it wasn't a pig, Dave. To storm into shops and grab PlayStations, trainers, phones and plasmas. It was insane. I remember being in my office, in Canary Wharf, and seeing the news stories come up on my laptop screen. How there was people rioting in Whitechapel. And then it moved up to Limehouse, a little bit closer. And I remember looking at this on my laptop and thinking, God, if they get any closer, if they come into the wharf and they burn down this building, I better nip out and get the beers and balloons in now. What are you doing? Why are you stood there laughing? I don't know. What am I supposed to do? Well, give me a hand. Call the fire brigade or something. I don't know. I mean, they're very busy. I don't want to make a fuss. As media and social media and BlackBerry Messenger alerts spread, so too did this, new craze. Basically, people saw what was happening, on the news and on their phones. And the majority of them were like, oh my God, this is terrible. This is actually really frightening. But a small subset of them were thinking, yeah, I should do that. It was like this sort of social media, BBM fueled craze. It was like the ice bucket challenge meets supermarket sweep. Except, no Dale Winton. Although, even in the absence of Dale Winton, it still managed to be shitter than supermarket sweep. How dare you? He were a national treasure, God rest his soul. All right. I don't know. He might have been there. Loads of people were at it, weren't they? And everyone had hoods up and balaclavas and scarves over their faces. He could have been there. What on earth are you suggesting now? I'm just saying that I don't know if Dale Winton was a London rioter or not. I've not seen compelling evidence either way. So now you're saying that a beloved man who's passed away was a bad TV host, and he might have been a thief, right? That's the sort of positivity that you want to put out to your viewers, is it? And he was a bad host. Yeah. You should be ashamed of yourself. Yeah, I suppose I should be. Anyway, as the riots exploded over the more deprived parts of London, Bristol, Coventry, Derby, Liverpool, Manchester. God, it sounds like some up-and-coming indie band's self-funded tour, doesn't it? Focus fell on these fumbling, foolhardy fellows to restore confidence in the police and to look very, very cross indeed.
These are sickening scenes.
These are sickening scenes.
Sickening scenes.
I mean, to be fair, he looks quite angry, doesn't he? He looks really cross at the unacceptable behaviour of his aides, who have dragged him back off holiday to come and deal with this shit.
Sickening scenes.
It's like big fed up dad energy, isn't it? like when your dad just wants to get on with fixing the car or doing the oil, or maybe he's doing a roast dinner or something. He just wants to focus on that. But you and your brother are messing around in the other room, and he has to keep leaving the thing that he actually wants to do to come and sort you two out. He's like, look, I'm trying to sort dinner in here, but I can't do that if every 5 minutes I have to come back in here and stop you feeding batteries to your brother. Fed up dad.
Sickening scenes.
Dragged back begrudgingly, involuntarily, to come back against his will and have to parent the unruly, the uncivilized.
I also want to say to the people I want to say, can you hear me at the back? Well, perhaps, where are you? You're over there.
Just as a side note, by the way, I love this clip of Theresa May and Boris Johnson together. it's like 7 years before he ousts her as Prime Minister, right? 7 years, but you can already see she just cannot stand him. Look at the face!
Sickening scenes.
Anyway, look, all of this is fun, right? It's all a bit retro. But today we are here to ask the awkward and I think somewhat prescient question. What would it take for civil unrest to kick off in Britain again? Again. Because look, I'm not saying I want to see, buildings burning down or the police having a hard time. Sometimes I wonder, what with the mortgages, the rents, the energy bills, taxes, it can't be much longer now, can it? Are we really this neutered that we just let government run amok, nick all of our money, financially castrate us, and we're just like, oh my God, Terry!
Yeah?
It says on here they're going to double your mortgage, they're going to make you homeless, you're going to be living on the street.
What are you babbling on about?
In a tent, but then they're going to scoop you and your tent up and put you in the back of a bin lorry.
Well, that's not very convenient.
Yeah!
I tell you what, I'm going to write the best Twitter thread about this.
In recent history, that's kind of all we do, but that's the point of this video today, is to ask the question, what would it take for Britain to just snap? Because in 2011, it was sparked by anger at the Metropolitan Police. But it's now widely accepted that initial social justice anger was then co-opted by an underclass who were just vitriolic. Just a subset of people who felt hopeless and disconnected and were just, frankly, fed up with never being able to afford anything. Cast aside, unacknowledged, and with very, very little margin for change. And so there was this, perhaps naive expectation that the people that society had forgotten would continue to respect society. Excuse me, you're a charmless vagrant pauper, and I wish you'd just catch the plague and die. All right. I'm probably just gonna go and loot curries then, innit? Why don't you feel like playing a role in polite society? It's like for this subset of the population, it was like a window opened for them, where they were like, I'm just gonna do it. And probably all of their mates were like, are you insane? You'll get nicked. But they were like, there's not enough cells. There's not enough coppers. Trust me, they can't arrest all of us. And besides, they're all just standing there. And to some extent, that attitude was right. Because in 2011, there were 90,000 people in prison. The cells were at capacity. And worryingly, now, at time of recording, there are still 90,000 people in prison. And only a month ago, we were all warned that prisons are over 100% capacity. In 2011, there were 32,000 police officers in London. As of now, there's only 1,000 more than that. So the police and prisons have pretty much just stayed stagnant, while the population of London has grown by another 1 million. But that's just the opportunism angle of it. The whole, maybe I'll go out and get myself a free TV. That sort of layer to this. What about desperation? What about hunger? In 2011, only 128,000 people were using food banks. And that's not even in London. That was the whole of the UK. At time of recording, we're up to 3 million. 3 million people now are using food banks regularly. Although it's weird, isn't it? Because I'm sure that bleached Frankenstein, Neanderthal, said that we don't have a poverty problem here in the UK. It's just that people can't budget or learn to cook properly. But I always think it's weird, isn't it? It's funny how people lost the knack of budgeting and didn't know how to cook properly as soon as the Tories came to power, isn't it? What a kooky coincidence. In fact, maybe we could grill him on it now, because I am fortunate enough to have him in the studio with me right now. Lee, thanks for joining us. Listen, I know you're short on time, so let's just get straight into it. You said that the reason that so many people were using food banks is because they haven't learned to budget, or they haven't learned to cook properly. But I was looking at a graph and it says that after the Tories came to power, that is when food banks exploded. So it seems weird that people suddenly forgot how to cook and budget as soon as the Conservative government came. Any response to that?
I like badgered.
Right. Like, it's a bit like how, as they oversaw the housing crisis, right, it's not that they continued to fail to invest in social housing. It's not that they continued to fail to greenlight sufficient developments to build enough private housing. It's none of that. It's definitely not the fault of the Conservative Party. It's just that from 2010 onwards, young people just got weirdly, inexplicably, like really into avocados. And it just continued throughout the May and Johnson years. It's just weird, guys. This scourge of avocado addiction, robbing young people of their future as they try desperately to get their fix, no matter the cost to their household finances. No, Dave, no, that money was for the deposit. I can't help it, Pippa. I can't stop. I don't want to stop. Like, honestly, like Michael Gove, Rishi Sunak, why are you wasting your time criminalising NOS canisters when clearly the youth of today are hopelessly addicted to a South American seeded fruit? And it's costing them everything, guys. It's ruining lives. It's taking financial security. It's taking their homes. You gotta ban them, Rishi. Ban them, Michael Gove. Ban the avocados. Ban the avocados.
Burn the avocados. Burn the avocados.
Anyway, so back to desperation. So you've got packed prisons, no extra capacity, you've got the same number of police, and now there are 3 million people more using food banks now than there were back in 2011. And you've got 1 million more people living in London. Do you see what I'm getting at? Like, if 2011 was a pressure cooker, then like, what are we looking at now? The same stretched resources, but more desperate people. And I mean that both in a population sense, because we're now, like 67 million people in the UK. And proportionately, more of those are desperate. That is just an inarguable fact. But also, more desperate people in the sense that the people who are, or could be, classed as desperate are even more desperate than they were back then. Because out of that 67 million, 6.7 million are on universal credit. That's 10% of the population, 10% of your town. And rather than being scroungers or whatever Hunt would like you to think they are, half of those are in work already. They just need the extra support because their employers don't pay them enough to just exist. Like, it's such a weird, warped and inefficient way of managing poverty, isn't it? Like, it really gets to the core, to the absurdity of the Conservative condition, I think. Like, if people weren't given dole money, they wouldn't be able to afford to work at somewhere like Burger King. And then places like Burger King or Primark or Costa wouldn't be able to find staff. And they'd have to hike wages to be able to attract people to come and work there. But by not regulating that, the government just let the corporations pay the bare minimum. And then what happens? Then the state have to pick up the slack. And then you get people like, Dominic Raab and Liz Truss and Jeremy Hunt, who they get all fiery, like, no, why are all these people on benefits? Whose fault is this? Who is to blame? While people with brains are like, it's you. Like, if you upped the minimum wage to a living wage, to something that actually covered the cost of living, you wouldn't be having to pay the difference out of your own exchequer's tax money. Like, how are you not getting it? Like, were you starved of oxygen? Did you take one too many drugs? Or avocados? Or
Burn the avocados! Burn the avocados!
Honestly, it's like, you don't want loads of people on benefits, do you? Oh, God, no. Right, well, if you legislate a living wage, then companies would have to pay them more, and then they wouldn't need universal credit. Listen, I don't like dole scroungers, but I'm afraid the hate runs just too deep to ever consider some way of helping them to stop being dole scroungers. Oh, God. I mean, I hate what they are, but I hate it so much that I can't help them to stop them being what they are. I mean, you roll your eyes at me, but you must hate someone. Oh, yeah. Right, well, would you ever help that person to change into a more acceptable version of themselves? I don't think there's a cure for psychopathy. So anyway, so 6.7 million on benefits, and half of those are already in work and desperate. So to bring it back to my original point, like, what would it take to spark something with those people? Like, can it be that far off now? Because Hunt's autumn statement talked of further sanctions on universal credit. That means people who are already so broke they have to get their wages topped up by the government could have those benefits slashed. And so what's going to happen then, right? They're going to fall further behind on their rent and their bills. And that's just the ones who are registered on universal credit. There's a whole other 2 million people who are unemployed but just kind of, not on the grid. I guess what I'm saying is this, like, between UC people and non-UC people, there is just this huge subset of the population that we are about to push to their limit. So, spool back to the components that first sparked the London riot. You had packed out prisons, overstretched police. You had a deprived underclass who felt like they had very little to lose. Like, I suppose this is my question. How many of us would actually be that surprised if something did kick off in the next few weeks or months? Which was a question posed by The Economist late last year, when they published a study that suggested most Britons expect civil disorder within the next decade. Meanwhile, the World Civil Unrest Index has moved us up from risk-free to medium. Like, here's a terrifying question for you, right? If people are starving now, if people are already, like, proper struggling, given that food banks are just stocked by donation, how much longer do you think they can survive with the soaring numbers of people using them? How long do you think it's going to be until food banks run dry? And what happens then? People are already shoplifting. That's up 25%. So what's going to happen when the food banks shutter? People are going to kick off. Buildings are going to get burnt down and looted. People could get killed. People are going to look out their window and go, yeah, do you know what? This is the first chance, this is the first opportunity I've had in months, maybe years, to actually fully stock my fridge. And where the 2011 riots were, big and scary, the anger and the damage was largely contained to a subset of hoodies who really wanted some trainers. Whereas you could make the case that the 2024 riots, if that's when this actually happens, have the potential to be even more deadly, because not everyone does really need the new Reeboks, but everyone needs to eat. And it's not unreasonable to suggest that a now exploding number of people might get hangry enough to get looty.
Sickening scenes.
Like, that is going to happen, and I don't think it's actually that far away. I think it's probably in the near future. And the weird thing is like, here we are right now, at time of recording, we're just going into December 2023. And it is totally within the power of those in Westminster to start looking ahead and going, right, okay, this could get really ugly. What measures do we need to put into place to guard this, to keep people safe and make sure everyone keeps their heads cool? Act now, before the catalyst sparks whatever this all turns into. Before the Met accidentally murder someone. Before a policeman is acquitted of something awful. It's totally within their power to get ahead of this. But instead, like, what are they doing? What are we all doing? What are we talking about? It's James Cleverly's language and immigration numbers. So just to bring us back to the original topic, if the question is, how far away are we right now in Britain from civil unrest? Honestly, I would say it could happen any day now. So yeah, pretty sobering stuff, right? It's making me anxious. I just need something to take the edge off. You fucking sweet. Stop.